What's going up, guys? Welcome back to the Code. Dr. Andrew Fix from Physio Room here. And again, you've heard this on a different episode. We're sitting inside of V23, talking with owner Beau Doring, V23 Athletics. So, Beau, welcome to the show. Welcome to the Code.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Well, great to be here. Thanks for having me in the gym so we can do this. But I don't know how many months it's been, less than a year probably, that since I've met you and gotten to know you a little bit through some conversations, but people on this show probably don't know much about you. So will you share a little bit about your background, who you are, and how'd you come to open this gym?
Background, multi-sport athlete from San Diego, California. I've had a sampler platter of careers, sampler platter of passions, and got into fitness around, I've been I'm a self-titled recovering meathead, right? So I did the gym thing for a long time and then got into endurance. Got into, kind of ran the whole gamut, found CrossFit in 2009 and was just getting out of the military. I was an engineer at the time, and I just decided that I wanted to work with human beings and not machinery and computers. I've been teaching, like some of my first memories are like teaching kids how to do backflips off the swings when I was like, 5, 6 years old.
Yeah.
So I've always kind of been a teacher at heart, and then did the CrossFit thing for a while, small competitions, and then just kind of continued to peek behind the curtain of strength and conditioning, and started seeking mentors and finding out everything I could, and that led to a couple different gyms, couple different passions, strongman, powerlifting, and then opened V23 in 2016.
Awesome.
And haven't looked back since. So I've been first V23 in 2016, which is a little more of an exclusive barbell club. Working with some NFL and combine athletes as well, and then that blossomed into what we have here now. So yeah, 6 years later, it's been a wild ride.
Sweet. Well, let's unpack a little bit of that. So, and just for the record, one of the things that I like the most about this gym is kind of like the culture of it and the feeling of the environment when I walk in. But you're from San Diego, but of course we're in Colorado now. When did you move here? When did you move to Colorado?
So I was an engineer. I'd gotten out of the Air Force in 2006. Got the first job I wanted. I was the 21st employee with a company called Bosch Global Services, doing unmanned aerial vehicles. So a lot of the looks like a PlayStation thing where they're flying the plane somewhere, blowing some stuff up, doing whatever. Did that for a number of years and was living in Vegas at the time. Fitness was always kind of at the heart of what I did, and I wanted something more. I left the security, of the bachelor life.
Yeah.
3,300 square foot house in Vegas. Everybody thinks you're living the dream, but I was just pretty unfulfilled with what I was doing. And my folks had just moved to Colorado and opened up a steakhouse. So I figured I've always been avid outdoors. I competed in downhill mountain biking for a very short period until I found out I was awful at it. And which is the best way to find out if you should do something, right? Is that feedback loop. And moved out here to help my folks open the steakhouse in 2009.
See, I was gonna say, and you like steak, so
yeah, I like steak. So it was a
naturally
natural connection there, natural connection, affinity for red meat. And that was on the western slope. So for those that aren't familiar with Colorado, the western slope is gorgeous, but I moved out with the intention that everyone here snowboards. Everybody has a truck with 3 mountain bikes on it, living this incredibly active lifestyle. And western slope, I love it. It has a special place in my heart, but it's a little different than the front ranges for those that are familiar with Colorado, not familiar. So as a security blanket, so I was out there for about 2 years as a security blanket. At that point, I made the decision that I knew I was going to go into strength and conditioning. I knew I enjoyed working with people. Fitness has always been a common denominator in my life, whether it was a baseball player. It was through hard times or great times. Fitness was the one thing that I could always rely on. And we can delve into it later, but even getting into this, as broke as I've been, because you don't make a lot of money when you get into strength and conditioning, especially fitness from general population. Some of the hardest times in my life, it was my gym membership and my fitness and my health that got me through. And not only that, but also provided me the opportunity down the road. It was like preparing for what I didn't know I was going to do.
Yeah.
Right. Subconsciously. So as a security blanket, I knew I was committing to strength and conditioning and fitness. So I deployed back to Afghanistan as a contracted engineer, and that's where I really dug in. So if, for those of you like in Afghanistan, if you're not actively engaged, it's like being in prison, right? You don't want to be bored in prison. So what do you do in prison? You work out, you read books, you want to keep yourself occupied and keep yourself busy. Not that I've been in prison, but I would imagine, right? So I spent that 9 or 10 months that I was in Afghanistan. Just
When was that?
that was 2011.
Okay.
And I just dug into everything. We weren't incredibly busy out there, this small forward operating base, but I was every YouTube video, every coach, I found a lot of the mentors that I still have today, even passively, right? There's people that have inspired me.
Yeah.
A lot of those set the foundation and the philosophy for how I still guide my training today. So was out there in 2011, moved. That's when I also decided I was going to come to the front range. There's far more opportunity out here, and ended up getting connected with the gentleman who owns CrossFit now, Eric Rosa, phenomenal leader, tech CEO, and phenomenal guy. He had just opened a very, very large gym in Boulder, Colorado. I never thought I would end up in Boulder. And this gym opened up, and I was coaching at another gym at the time and bartending actually. And a friend of mine told me this huge gym was opening up. I'm like, how did I not know about this? So went over there. They just opened their door. They had just opened their doors in this large facility, and they didn't have a spot for me.
Okay.
They said, hey, like, we'd love to have you on, but our slots are filled. You can hang out and work out. And so that's what I did. So my first real fitness position, I didn't get paid for probably 6 to 8 weeks. I just showed up every day, and if barbell storage needed to be mounted on the wall, that's what I did. I would custom greet people who were coming into the gym like it was my own business. And when they saw that, there was one coach out there, I think he's still in the area actually, that was bombing a base camp. Bombing, I mean, horrible. And the head coach has his head in his hands like this, and he's watching this. I was about watching this shit show go on in front of him. And he's like, Beau, get in there, here's your chance. And so I went in there, and that was it.
There it is.
There it is. And then next thing you know, I was running the strength program, ran the competitor program there for a little bit, but it was like anything else. And my curiosity led me to continue to peek behind more and more curtains. So I started with general population fitness, then led into more of the principles of strength and conditioning, which led to strongman, which led to powerlifting, which led to me training, some pretty significant, professional athletes that I'm not going to name drop or anything, but it was all about the curiosity, just continuing to ask why, and peek behind those curtains. That's what V23 is.
Sure.
So when people would go to our website or they go to our Instagram, they're like, what do these people do here? Like, I see this 260-pound strongman mutant throwing around 300-pound logs, but then I also see them doing these crazy 75-minute endurance pieces. Then everybody has big butt and big traps. Like, what is going on there? Because it doesn't say it's CrossFit, it doesn't say it's powerlifting or whatever. So it's defined as to limit. So when people ask what we do here, we teach the principles of strength and conditioning at a level that exceeds expectation, which is not an answer people like. They want to know, when am I going to lose my weight? When is this going to happen?
Because it's a gray area, right? But it's not a black and white answer.
It's an exploration. Yeah, it's an exploration. So, I jokingly told you, for those that we just wrapped up a little conditioning piece. Where was I going with that? I totally just lost my track. But I think what I've learned and the way I teach is more of a philosophy of strength and conditioning rather than the science of strength and conditioning. And this is why you can jump on YouTube right now, and there's a tutorial for how to get a 700-pound back squat, how to climb Everest barefoot, right? Wim Hof stuff. All of these very high achievers, there are tutorials. We know the X's and O's. So if we know the X's and O's, but when we go to Costco, we see the general population, and all this information is free, then what's missing? What's missing is the stepping stone from building a physically fulfilling life is much different than building IKEA furniture. You can't just open the instructions and go A, B, C, D, and now I have the vanity mirror I want.
I did that.
Fitness does not work like that, right?
Yeah.
So then what's missing? What's missing is guidance. What's missing is some passion and some hard work, right? So that's where we talk about like the philosophy of this stuff. The people I know that are most successful have the whys and the hows locked down. They're almost more important than the what.
Oh, for sure.
And I'm sure you see that in your side of the practice on the opposite side of what we do, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah, I mean, and I totally agree with you. There's a awesome book, Simon Sinek, right? Like start with why. The what and the how are not as important as the why, because if you don't have that, whether you're talking about business, whether you're talking about fitness, or holding yourself accountable, whatever you're talking about, that's the driving force, right? Like, and if you don't have that, it's so easy for things to get derailed, right? If you were mentioning the Air Force, right? If you are 1 degree off over the course of flying some lengthy distance, you're going to be way off course, right? It's 1 degree, but it makes a massive, massive difference over the course of time.
Right. So what does that tell you? That trajectory,
Mhm.
right, is more important than your current location.
Yes.
And if that's not a metaphor for how we should approach strength and conditioning, even from, let's talk about the general fitness where, scaling, I hope I'm not getting too off track here, but it's like everybody knows how to scale things down. Everybody knows that to pull up, you drop to a ring row, to before you squat, you goblet squat, or whatever the thing is. But do we know how to scale up? Because I know a lot of people that have been pretty good for a long time. I know people who've been doing this 5, 6, 7, 10 years that haven't made real progress. And you could probably make an argument that they might have almost started getting a little worse because now they start running into injury, they start running into stagnation. Now their attention span, so they're bouncing around from gym to gym trying to find a solution rather than taking responsibility for where they're at, slowing down and starting to put some mastery into it rather than doing the thing.
Yeah.
And one of the metaphors I use is you have your pen and your tablet in front of you. It's a good thing I don't have that because my handwriting is horrible. And my handwriting is horrible because at some point my handwriting got good enough that everybody can understand it.
Mhm.
And so I stopped improving that.
Sure.
So what does that tell you about your 10,000 hour rule? That if I'm not getting active feedback on my handwriting, right? I know it's awful, trust me. Like, the doctor scribble, we joke on anytime we don't have a whiteboard here.
Yeah.
Because we had a whiteboard, it looks like hieroglyphics. It's like
Can't read it.
cave paintings, right? And it's because at some point along the way, my handwriting got good enough for what I used it for.
Yeah.
So what does that tell us about with the fitness thing? At some point, if I'm not getting feedback and I'm not striving, doing active measures to improve, then at some point, my fitness is just going to get good enough, right? And if I'm not one to really walk the path of good enough, and I don't know where that came from, I think there's always been an innate curiosity with me to how do we move this forward? How do we improve? How do we improve? To delve even deeper, when it comes to injury, when we scale intensity, right? Intensity is always talked about in the fitness realm, right? Intensity, movement. But when it comes to complexity, now complexity with human movement is one thing that the body has how would I say it? There's no ceiling for complexity.
Sure.
There's a ceiling now when you talk about capacity, there's a ceiling for that based on your GPP, right? There's only so much you're going to be able to squat until your back gets stronger. There's only so much you can get with deadlift until this improves. And if you try to outperform your capacity too often, you end up in physio room.
You end up at our office. That's right.
But with complexity, that's one of the ways that we can continue to increase and scale up for a long time and stay relatively injury free. There's no way you can do this for any significant amount of time without bumps and bruises.
Sure.
We all know that. Do you know how I learned about my body? Bumps and bruises.
Yeah.
A lot of bumps and bruises, right? So
I think
less
that's
than
I think, the bumps and bruises and things, I think is one of the things that fortunately or unfortunately, unfortunate that I had some of the injuries and things that I had. Fortunate though, I learned from every one of those situations. It makes me a better provider. I can relate to people. I've gone through it myself. I understand, shoes that they're in, even if we don't have the exact same condition going on, right? I get it. I've been there. And I'm a better off athlete for it because I improved other things along the way that otherwise probably would have never been improved because they were good enough, right? Just like you kind of said. But I like the point that you made about mostly everybody knows how to regress things and scale things down when it's too difficult for somebody. But there's often a ceiling on what people's ability is to scale things up, right? And I see that a lot of times in our industry, in the physical therapy rehab kind of industry, is I hear therapists say something along the lines of, well, they're not in pain anymore, so they don't need to be in physical therapy. Like when did the definition of physical therapy mean someone has to be in pain in order for you to help them optimize their function? Because function and pain, like, you know, the goal is function and the goal is optimizing function. If there are symptoms, well, hopefully we can get those to improve along the way. But I've had conversations with people a lot about, you know, maybe someone has really significant knee arthritis and they have pain. That doesn't mean that we can't still get you stronger despite the fact that you have pain, so that you can go up and down the stairs easier. You can get, you know, where you need to go. You can pick up your grandkids, like whatever it is, even though you have pain. Like, do you want pain to stop you from functioning, or do you want to still be able to function despite having that? Yeah, and I see that a lot. Physical therapists as a whole are great at regressing things and bringing things down to easier and easier ways to do it. But there's often a ceiling on, like, can you help someone who is not in pain and who, generally speaking, does things fairly well? Can you help them do them better? And there is a significant limit to, I think, the profession as a whole on people's ability to do that. Which is why we need relationships. You need to know, like, you know, what is your expertise? What is someone else's expertise, right? Like, I am not going to put together a program for someone to train for a strongman competition. I'm gonna send them over to here, over to you guys, right? To do that, because I know my limitations on that. Now, that doesn't mean I don't want to get better, but yeah, I see exactly what you're talking about all the time in the office. Not in our office. Our providers do an awesome job at this because we look at things through that lens of performance and of longevity, not of let's get you out of pain.
Yeah.
Right. It's of let's get you to function more optimally. And along the way, your symptoms will probably go away, but that's not the goal. The goal is the function and the performance.
Right, and our focus is, you know, I talk with a lot of practitioners, and it's ubiquitous across practitioners on your end and my end, that everybody's talking about bridging this gap.
Yeah.
But we have to bridge the gap because
Yeah, sure.
you can't clamshell your way back, you know, doing clamshells, pardon my French, but like you can't do clamshells on the turf like a loser for 6 months and expect to come back and compete or deadlift 600 pounds.
Right.
Also, you can't get a 600-pound deadlift without running into that wall too many times where you need to seek therapy and move better and slow down, re-engineer and improve. Because sometimes you have to put too much salt on the food to know it's too much salt on the food. Sometimes the pendulum swings too far. And unfortunately, if you want to do this for any significant amount of time, that's going to happen. The pendulum's going to swing too far. That's how we learn. But there's a difference, like there are corrective exercises and there's exercising correctly.
Sure.
And I think with the focus, we spend thousands and thousands. I mean, I know athletes not here, but they spend thousands of dollars on corrective exercises, but they won't spend on a gym membership or hiring a coach. So it's what we're trying to do is get more of a focus on exercising correctly. And I think if that's the focus, now there's a lot to unpack there because exercising correctly puts some responsibility in the athlete's hands,
Sure.
which makes them learn, right? So now we're adding complexity, we're adding more conversation, but an athlete that knows how to exercise correctly, what I have observed, understands corrective exercises better when they go to see somebody like you.
Yeah.
Because they have the basic movement lexicon. They know what the lats are supposed to do in their bench press. They know whether they feel their hamstrings in the bottom of their squat or they're collapsing forward. So an athlete with a more advanced taste or more advanced lexicon in what we do by exercising correctly, when they go to see you, number one, that's gonna make your job light years easier.
Oh, yeah.
And number two, when you give them the corrective exercise to do, they're gonna ask you questions.
Yeah.
And they're gonna say, hey, like, no, dude, I need eyes on. Am I doing this right or am I not?
Right.
To where a lot of practitioners even, you know, you and I have bridged the gap is it's critical for me as a coach that the practitioner I'm speaking with understands the language and the lens in which I view it. And the more coaches I've worked with, that's how I've refined my own lens with strength and conditioning. I've been to some phenomenal gyms and I've been to some dumpster fire gyms. I've seen phenomenal practitioners and I've worked with dumpster fire practitioners. And it's through that I groomed my own taste and who I want to work with. And it's because of the gyms I've gone to that has groomed my taste into what V23 is today. And I got invited to Westside Barbell in 3 weeks for a private training session. I may come back with a lot of information and we may change everything.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that will happen, but let's bring it back around to refusing to define, and to define is to limit. V23 is going to be a different expression next year than it is this year.
Sure.
Thank God it's different than it was 6 years ago. And thank God it's different than it was when I opened my first CrossFit gym in 2009. I didn't open, I wasn't the owner, but I helped an individual open it because I knew light years more about strength and conditioning than they did. And I had people puking during my warm-ups, right? So thank God that it has evolved that way.
Mm.
But my concern is I go into the next stage of kind of my coaching career is like, how do I coach coaches?
Yeah.
And how do I get coaches to break the dogma of the thing? And let's just call, this is not anti-CrossFit. Let's just call CrossFit the thing. How can I break your framework that fitness is more than thrusters and wall balls? How can I break that? Because I don't know how deep we want to go into this. At the highest level, guess what they're not doing a whole lot of?
Yeah.
Whole lot of thrusters and wall balls until it's competitive season. What are they doing? They're essentially training. How do I say this? They're doing aerobic work, they're doing strength work, and they're doing gymnastics.
Sure.
Let's do that. We don't need to always constantly mix it up
Yeah.
into this unknown and unknowable. Because like we talked about, I know what my athletes are doing outside the gym, my general population is doing outside the gym for 16 hours a day. They're sitting down,
working on a computer.
and they're more active than most, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I know that their upper back's likely underdeveloped, and even that's even with CrossFitters, when I've worked one-on-one with some pretty high level athletes, what we do is hips and upper back. I know their glutes are probably underdeveloped. I know they don't sprint a lot, right? They don't have capacity to do it. And for the most part, for a lot of people, their VO2 isn't in the 70th percentile.
Yeah.
Right? So what do we do to improve that? I don't throw random 24-minute workouts at them. That's what I don't do. What I do is ask questions about how I can move the needle for that specific athlete. So that's why we also don't have the whiteboard here. People goo and gaw and obsess over the whiteboard.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, that is a poor carrot to dangle and incentivize, because what do you incentivize?
Yeah.
What do you, if you prescribe an athlete to do 24 reps on crossover symmetry or 24 clamshells as fast as they can, what's going to happen? What do you incentivize?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So then how does this play into strength and conditioning? How does this play into intensity? How does this play into complexity? That we need to take a better approach with strength and conditioning principles that we've known about for 50 years, reversibility, adaptation, how to make progress, progressive overload. How do we package these and blend that with the black box effect that CrossFit is famous for, and it works. It works.
Yep.
Is it a dose response issue? Why a lot of people are broken and people don't catch their power cleans the best and they starfish way out here? That's probably they've at some point, back to the handwriting, their handwriting got good enough that they stopped deciding to get better and they decided that just doing the thing was good enough. At V23, doing the thing isn't really good enough.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like we're constantly learn, evolve. How do we improve?
Yeah, and I think there's a fine line to that, like idea of being good enough. And I had a couple comments over the course of my life come my way. One happened yesterday, right? And without getting too deep into the story, I was wearing a relatively fitted shirt, playing softball, and someone says, "Andrew, it looks like you need to lift a little bit more weights," right? And they're being sarcastic, right? They're saying like, well, is all that you do lifting weights? I'm like, well, that's, that's not the point, right? It's not about how I look. It's like, this is part of my lifestyle, right? This is something that I want to do, I'm going to do. And I've had other people make similar comments over my life of, why do you need to go to the gym today? Aren't you already in good enough shape? I'm like, that's not the point, right? I'm not doing it to be in better shape than you or anyone else, right? Like, it's part of my life, it's part of my lifestyle, part of my habits, all this stuff. But I think there is a point, if we got into this conversation of the term good enough, like a different way, where you don't need to be perfect in order to step into the arena type of thing, right? Like, there is a point where something is good enough to start applying it, but that doesn't mean you don't continue to refine, to tailor it, to train and whatever. Because one thing that I also, and I'm sure you're the same way, is I don't like to listen to people who aren't doing the thing, right? Who aren't in the arena. Like, you could be the greatest person at like analyzing something, but unless you're doing it and you can speak from experience, or you can say, hey, this is what I've learned, what do you think, type of thing. I don't want to hear it, right? I don't want to talk about what ifs. I'm like, well, let's do it. And but I like what you said about, we're being curious, we're asking questions to figure out how can we view things for this particular athlete? What are we going to do for you? Because the prescription, if you will, I like to talk about what I give people to do. I'm not giving people some stretches to do, or not giving someone some exercises to do. It's a prescription for that person. What you would give one CrossFit athlete is different than you would give someone else, because it's a different situation. They have a different life outside the gym. Even if the training session that they're doing is the same, and they have the same issues, the prescription to address their issues might be different from person to person.
And there's a lot to unpack there.
Totally.
I think you said the first thing is like, it's a practice.
Yeah.
Training's a practice. And what is there's the term that comes to my mind when I think practice, like the term that's tethered to that, is repetition.
Mm-hmm.
Another term could be improvement.
Yeah.
But when it comes to feedback loops, well, when it comes to actually improving a practice, you have to have a feedback loop.
Yeah.
Right. I might tell two different stories here. If I'm throwing a baseball, right? I was a baseball player.
Yep.
If I'm pitching, and I did pitch for a little bit, and I throw a fastball, it's either a strike or a ball, right? That's a feedback loop. So I can get pretty good just by continuing to throw baseballs and refine that, right? You could have a pitching coach. You could have a number of different things that'll give you feedback. I'm gonna speed this up. So let's take that to fitness, right? As we sit in this room, there's a garbage can about 6 feet from me, right? So we start with the garbage can 3 feet away, crumble up paper balls, and I'm nailing, boom, boom. I get to where I'm shooting 99% at 3 feet. Then we move it back, 5 feet. Now I start out like 60%, and then I refine it. And then next thing you know, I'm 90% better. We move it back. That becomes a practice. What tends to happen is athletes stay 6 feet away from the basket, and they feel like Kobe, right?
Yeah.
They're like, they got the 23 jersey on, they're taking it to the hole. They're bragging to everybody about how they're killing it. They're only 6 feet away.
Yeah.
You're only 6 feet away. So the moment you get to that where you think you're killing it, something needs to change. You need to move the target. You need to move the goal.
Yeah.
How we move the goal could be load, could be load, could be range of motion, could be complexity, could be any number of these things. But what's also tends to be very common is people only go faster and they only go heavier. That's 2 of about 10 variables I can use to move the needle for an athlete. Yeah, right. Because sometimes going slower is more difficult than going faster. Ask any gymnast, right? So sometimes you slow things down. Sometimes you do speed it up. Sometimes you do increase the weight on the bar. But those shouldn't be the only two tools that a coach has.
Yeah.
Right? So it's the same thing as a practitioner, and you can, maybe you see it differently. You rehab an athlete's knee and the knee's now better. Maybe it's a triage effect where you only fixed you fixed the gunshot wound before the stab wound, right? But perhaps once that knee's better, right, then there's something else, because you know as well as I do, there's something wrong with the knee, there's something upstream, downstream.
Yeah.
So you fix that, but then you tend to the next more important item. And then that process continues for the evolution of the athlete.
Yep.
And the smarter they are and the better they know how to manage it, they're coming to see you for a different problem in a year. Instead of 3 years later, it's the same.
Yeah.
It's the same elbow, it's the same shoulder. Whereas like that's not if the student's not learning, the teacher didn't teach. Then when it comes to a practice, like when you guys physio room is a practice.
Yeah.
You're teaching athletes how to not only manage their pain, but also to train through pain, to keep them moving. Right. You know, the last thing you want to do is sit down and
oh man.
It's worse.
I had that conversation with a young high school athlete and her mother yesterday. You know, prototypical high school girl, soccer player, cross country athlete, squat, looks like a baby deer, you know, all the stuff you probably can picture that. But you know, the conversation we had was about, at what point do I need to tell you need to be out of your practice, out of soccer practice, out of running, cross country practice. I don't want to do that, right? I don't want to tell you, no, you can't practice. But you know, there's a fine line there between training through pain and making things worse, or making other things worse because of significant compensations and whatnot. And the conversation we ended up having was about the importance of, and I never use like fear as the motivator necessarily, but this is a real scenario where this young lady plays soccer. Well, we know ACL injuries are significant in soccer, especially female soccer. And, you know, based on her movement assessment, she's like just waiting for an ACL injury to happen. If I see things in this like double leg environment, I know what's happening when she's on one leg, right? Because her hip stability is not appropriate to support her on one leg. She's running, twisting, pivoting, cutting around. She's recently gone through a significant growth spurt. So she's uncomfortable with her new size and height of her body. So I was just trying to stress the importance to both of them of, I know you're 15. I know little aches and pains that you have tend to improve by you not doing anything. This is something that we need to get a handle on and help you take care of. One, because I want you to be able to play right now. But two, I want you to be able to play 4, 5, 10 years from now, because you're 15 years old. But I like what you were saying about how in the way, you didn't say this as a definition, but in the way you're describing practice, you're describing it as an intentional thing, not a going through the motions type of a thing. And I had to look something up on my phone there, because there's an awesome book that kind of, through science, validates a lot of exactly what you're saying, right? And the book is called Peak. One of the authors is Anders Ericsson, but that's what it talks about. Like, you could sit there and shoot free throws all day long and not be intentional and not be curious about any feedback or not want any feedback. You're just shooting free throws and not paying attention to things. You're not really going to get that much better at it. But if you're intentional and you listen to the feedback, you internalize and feel for certain feedback, you can improve these things. And then I looked up the definition of practice. And when it's used as a verb, that's exactly what the definition says. To perform an activity or an exercise or a skill repeatedly or regularly in order to improve or maintain proficiency. It doesn't say do things over and over just because, right? And a lot of times that's what happens is people just go through the motions and they say, well, I'm practicing. No, if you're practicing, you are doing things with intention. You are mentally tuned in to what's going on. You're not thinking about all the other stuff. You're very intentional about what's going on, and then you'll see things improve.
Yeah, you brought up one of, I think, the most fascinating, I don't even know if you call it an argument, but for deliberate practice and a quality specifically that is taste. And when I heard that, I don't know if it was from Peak, I can't remember where I was reading about Anders Ericsson.
Yeah.
But he talks about taste is closely tethered to our mental representation of something. So the better mental model we have of something, the closer we can operate to it. And we give you some examples. Shaun White's taste in a backside 720 is far superior to mine. So what does that mean? It means he can operate much more closely through his practice, right? Because he's repetition. He has very, very fine taste in the backside 720, therefore he can operate very close to it. Louis Simmons, whether you love him or hate him, his taste in the box squat, or Lauren Landau, strength and conditioning coach of the Denver Broncos, phenomenal speed coach. His taste in cutting, pivot, going around axes is superior to most people.
Mhm.
So how does this relate to what we're talking about? If you have poor taste, it is tethered to poor results.
Mhm.
So let's take Olympic lifting, for example. If you have poor taste in Olympic lifting, you are satisfied with your starfish power clean that you caught out here and your knees are all gross and caved, baby deer, right? If you have poor taste in squatting, you're okay with just totally collapsing. You know, you have the whole costume on with the lifters and the tape everywhere and 3 sets of knee sleeves on. Like you're satisfied with that poor performance.
Yeah.
So if we know that having poor taste in something equals poor performance is close and tethered, then how do we get an individual's taste inequality up?
Yeah.
And we have to improve. We have to have a better definition of what quality movement means. And then, yes, that can be deviated from time to time, but for the most part, we need to have a better understanding. And this is what we talk about with coaches is don't let the athlete's poor movement dull your eye.
Mhm.
Right? Think about that. So it's like coaches do this for so long and then they're on autopilot.
Yeah.
Like they've gotten so accustomed to watching poor movement. They're not going to take responsibility. Somewhere along the line, right? The elevator of, let's just say, you win strength and conditioning, you're the best coach ever at the 100th floor, and people start off down here on the first floor, right? Where it's like, I'm doing bodybuilding, right? Which I won't get into that. I'm doing bodybuilding. And then second floor, they get into some endurance stuff. Third floor, they fly in CrossFit. Like, whoa, I'm getting off of this floor. Actually, let me read. I'm a big fan. I'm an advocate of CrossFit. So let's say then they get up here where it's some fitness popularized franchise fitness method that only gets to say a Homo sapien, right? What Homo sapien is capable of is right here.
Yeah.
And it gets them just below that. That is the definition of good enough. And they get off the elevator there. Like, this is awesome. It's like, well, they're going to continue to be satisfied with only this level. Like, how do we move that up, right? How do we progress in complexity? Well, maybe then we do introduce Olympic lifting.
Mm-hmm.
But another thing, and I don't know if I'm famous for saying this or not, some people have heard, is like, we know when we've had a bad burrito, right? You've had a bad burrito, you know the difference between the quality.
That's a good one. That's a bad one.
Now, what you find, I prefer heft as a quality in my burrito, but I think we know when people's taste in the burrito is probably superior to their taste in programming or their gym.
Sure.
Or their coaching.
Yeah.
Or even coaches, they all love their own scent, right? So how can I now as a coach going in my next evolution refine coaches' tastes and refine coaches' lenses, right? So that they can better interact with the information and then potentially break the dogma and then create their own brand, their own lens, something that's uniquely theirs and their expression of their practice.
Yeah.
Right? You go learn about Ido Portal and the crawling and the crazy one-arm gymnastics. You go do that, explore that for a little bit, refine your taste in that.
Yeah.
Then go, I've thrown gymnastics seminars with Division I champions, right? And I learned from them. I've worked with strength and conditioning coaches and I've learned from them. So it's like a constantly refined. And I'm finding the longer I do this, the more that isn't common.
Right.
And to me, that doesn't seem special by any stretch of the imagination. I consider if you can't be a student, you are obviously not a teacher in my eyes, if you're not also a student. And I'm finding it's much more uncommon. So how can we bring in coaches from almost, because nobody goes to strongman school. I didn't go to strongman school to have 2 national champions. It was something that was thrown in my lap. I didn't go to NFL quarterback school to learn how to coach NFL quarterbacks. I didn't go to powerlifting school. Nobody gets a degree in this stuff.
Yeah.
Right? We're another common thread. Every human being is playing by the same rules. And what are those rules? Those are the principles of strength and conditioning and physiology. Those are the rules we're playing.
Yeah.
Adaptation, reversibility, which I talked about earlier. So if the better we understand the rules of the game, the better we can play the game with any athlete population. Now, obviously, I know my boundaries. There are certain things that I'm like, whoa, that's not something I'm willing to explore. That is way outside my pay grade. That's outside my experience. Let me help you find, because I speak the language, let me help you find a coach with that.
Sure.
There are athletes that I've been like, I can't help with that. My hands off. But then I have other athletes thrown in my hands that scare the bejesus out of me, that I'm like, I can do that.
Yep.
I can do at least improve this one aspect, because you'd say the better you want to be, the more coaches you need. Right?
Sure.
There's not a single, I've worked with a handful of professional athletes again, and all of those guys have their guys.
Yeah.
And
Multiple
by guys, I mean plural. They have 1 to 2 PTs, 1 to 2 chiros. You look at Russell Wilson, he walks around with an entourage, mental skills coach, this guy, this guy, this guy. So he has a team of individuals who all know their lanes. So I think, knowing your lane and knowing what you don't know.
Yeah.
Right. Knowing when to, when something's beyond my control. Like, dude, I had no idea what's wrong with the shoulder. Go see Dr. Fix over at Physio. Right. I don't want to get too off track.
Sure. No.
But I think there's something about continuing to learn and, the lens in which different people, different practitioners interact with the information.
Yeah.
To break your own framework, right? Break the framework down. And worst case scenario is you build it back up and it looks identical. Yeah. Sometimes you break your framework down, you rebuilding like, whoa, I've been doing it way wrong. Yeah. And then you pivot, and there's nothing wrong with admitting that, because if you can't look back, I'd say, I don't know how honest this is with you as a practitioner, but if you can't look back at what you're doing 3 or 4 years ago and kind of cringe a little bit, right? You're probably still doing some cringe-worthy stuff.
Sure, yeah.
You should be able to look back and be like, man, like I was dead set that this was the way, and it's not.
Yeah. And
I run into that all the time with movements, with language, with communication, with how I reach athletes, with business. Running a business is way harder than coaching. I can coach all day. Running a business, keeping a culture and a team together is asked more of me than anything else I've done in my life.
Maybe in just a minute, let's sort of get into that just a touch. But yeah, I think you're totally right. I can look back 3-4 years ago and cringe at some of the stuff that I was doing in the clinic as a provider. Now, to some extent, some of that is the environment that I was in did not allow me to work the way that I do now, right? You can't work with somebody in the way that I do now when you're treating 4 people at the same time.
That's a whole
not possible, right?
That's a big conversation.
And we can, now, but that doesn't mean I would have either. Like, I didn't know some of the stuff that I know now 4 years ago. So I have totally changed the way that I look at people, the way that I address certain things, than I did then. But, and you guys have heard us on this show go down that rabbit hole a little bit, talking about the way the system is and why we do what we do at Physio Room. But yeah, I mean, it's very obvious to me, and probably to the people listening to this show, that as a coach, like you said, I can coach all day, that you are very intentional about what you have people do and why you have people do those things, and about like the language that you use, the way that you communicate with people. That is, that's obvious. But like you just started to talk about, when you are an expert in one domain, there's, where was I going with this? I was sort of going down the path of like, know your lane, right? And if you try to be an expert at everything, you usually, like, I don't know many people that can do that, right? There's somebody out there, some man or woman that can do that. But when you try to be the expert at everything, you usually end up just being pretty average at most things and pretty good at a few. So, like, it's really important to know the limits of your expertise, your knowledge, or your whatever, your capacity to do things. Because we were just talking about this before we started recording. I don't want to be the expert in editing podcast audio files because that's not what I know how to do. It will take me so long to learn how to do that. Is that a skill that I need? Not necessarily. There's many other experts that can do that, and we would love to implore their, like, hire them to use their expertise to do that, so that I can continue to get better at other things, right? That are more in my lane. You don't need to be the expert at everything. You need to be able to be curious and ask questions and have other people that you can lean on, rely on. And one thing that I like about when we come in here and have conversations is it's apparent to me that you are very open to other people's input and other people's opinions and thoughts, as long as they can explain it, right? As long as there's some thought and some justification in a way behind it, right? Like, as long as you can say, this is why I believe the thing that I do, or why I do things the way that I do, without just making a blanket statement like, well, this is the way to do it.
Well, it's funny, and you probably just saw my ears perk up. Because it's like, I'm a skeptic. I'm a show me guy.
Yeah.
It's not pessimistic, but I'm a show me guy. So I've been doing this for a long time. I've seen things come and go.
Yeah.
That, and the flash of the pan, the 6 weeks to this, 10 weeks to this, 20, 75 hard, which if that's what gets you in the door, I'm all about what gets people moving. But I can't unknow how sustainable that is for the majority of the population. So here's my thing. I'm not critical of the idea. I'm never critical of the idea. I'm critical of the thinking behind the idea.
Yep.
And if we can, as an industry, and your industry, if we can all come together and stop, slinging doo-doo at each other like a bunch of monkeys and sit down and have a conversation, like, explain this to me.
Yep.
Because I have to admit that I don't understand something.
Yeah.
But what can I do as a coach to better my arguments is learn everything about what you do. You are against something, go learn everything about it if you're going to make statements, right? Because then now your argument's inevitable. There's something else you mentioned that I wanted to circle back to is I'm always skeptical. Expert is a word for other people to describe you.
Sure.
Expert's not a word for you to describe yourself.
Yeah, I like that.
Meanwhile, I also observed that being an expert is the opposite of being curious. And there are a lot of individuals that I look at, I'm like, don't know so much, bro.
Yeah.
I just don't know so much because it's not, I wrote about this the other day. It's not what you don't know that's holding you back in your practice or your life or whatever business. It's what you know.
Yeah.
And by that, I put in quotations like what you think you know, what you think is ineffable. That's what's holding you back.
Yeah.
In your training, in your life, in your relationship. And we can delve way into that, which I'm sure we don't have time for. But if people can let that sink in for a minute, it's like, just don't know so much.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know so much, now you're open to opportunity, you're open to change. Why do we cling so tightly to this dogmatic approach to fitness, or that this is the way you do something? It's like, there's more than one way to do anything. And so people have these arguments, people get on Instagram and they see LeBron doing half squats at 500 pounds. That's not a squat.
It's so funny that you brought that up.
He can't hear you over the last 5 zeros in his salary. You know what I mean? It's like, what are you talking about?
Yep.
So do you know why LeBron squats like that? Because if you walk into the Broncos strength and conditioning facility, if you're a general fitness coach, and you walk into the Broncos strength and conditioning facility watching squat, and you're like, bro, you need your feet underneath your hips, you need your toes out, and you need to squat ass to grass, you're getting kicked out. You're getting kicked out. If you walk into Westside Barbell and say the same thing, you're gonna get kicked out. If you walk into but then if a strength and conditioning coach, right, let's say NCAA or NFL or MLB coach walked into Moss Strength, right, which is one of the most successful Chinese weightlifting programs there is, it was like, no, you guys need to be squatting wide base, toes forward, just to parallel. You're going to get booted out.
Sure.
So it's not, like we talked about earlier, it's not the squat, it is a squat.
Yeah.
So how many types of squats do you know? Do you know how to apply them? I'm not sure how far we're going off track here, but too many people get lost in that expertness.
Yep.
And it's like, that's for other people to call you, bro. Like, I'm just a curious dude. Like, I'm a coach by what other people call me. I'm not like a self-titled guru. Guru's another word that,
Yeah, for sure.
like, no one calls you that, dude. You can't just make up your own name. Like, no one's gonna call you Black Hawk or Night Hawk or something. No one's calling you expert. You're calling yourself expert.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's blinding you.
Yeah, I totally agree, because like we were talking a lot before the show, on the show, about that word being curious. And if you are too proud to be able to ask questions, you're missing the boat, right? Like you've reached your ceiling pretty much until you take a step back, reflect, and then start to ask more questions and be a learner. And that's one of the things at Physio Room, you know, if we're considering bringing somebody onto the team, right? Bringing them into the practice, no matter what their role is. They could be someone that we call an office manager. They're sitting at the front desk, answering phones, building relationships with clients. You know, you understand that role. They could be a provider. They could be a marketing person. If you're not a voracious learner, you can't be on the team, right? There's not a seat for you on the bus.
Yep.
If you already are as good as you can get at something, you have to be willing and interested in learning and continuing to learn and not being too proud to keep learning. And that's, you know, that's one of the requirements to be on the team. And like what we know, right, is the answer is usually somewhere in the middle.
Mhm.
Like, this is not the only way to squat. This is not the only way to squat. You know, there's people in way on this side in politics and other beliefs, and there's way on this side. Usually the answer is somewhere in the middle, and those people are not always right, and these people are not always right.
It's context and task
For
specific.
sure. Yeah.
Right? It's context. And now, is there a certain framework that you should be able to get an individual into unloaded? Absolutely. But that individual is not going to find himself in that position on a football field or on a basketball court. So what do you want to reinforce? The posture and position necessary is in a sport specific for specificity to a sport. But for the general population, yeah, it's like, what's going to work best for the athlete? I mean, there's a lot of different ways to approach it.
For sure. Well, let's do this. Let's revert back to something that you said before. And like you said, maybe we're getting too much off track. There's not necessarily a track here, right? We can talk about whatever we want. And you know, based on feedback that we get from the show and whatnot, that's how we try to tailor some of these conversations. But taking coaching aside for a second, you know, you had said that being a business owner, running a business for you is a way different challenge than coaching, right? Coaching is something that you've had hours and hours and hours of intentional practice, reps of doing, and you know, you probably feel more comfortable doing that at an extremely high level compared to being a business owner, right? So go down that rabbit hole for just a second. What are some of the challenges that you've seen, and how have you overcome or tried to improve at some of those from a business leadership, running a facility, trying to establish and foster a culture type of a discussion?
That's a great question. And I attribute the only reason we're here right now, and that I have, well, not the only reason, there's a number of reasons, but I grew up with my father in the restaurant business, and that time that we resort back when I moved from Las Vegas to Colorado, I was out there for about 2 years, and I watched my dad's in the restaurant business forever. And I actually find a lot of analogs between the restaurant industry and the fitness industry.
Sure.
And yeah, there's a formula to both, where everybody, you know, let's talk about another analog. So many people are born with like the restaurant gene, where they want to own a restaurant. And it's like, that's one of the least successful endeavors you could ever get into is being a restaurateur.
Very difficult.
And people get into it because they're passionate. They like food. That's great.
Yeah.
Food has very little to do with the restaurant, believe it or not.
Yes.
Right? It's experience, it's culture, it's consistency.
Yeah.
Consistency. Do you know what you're going to get every single time?
Yeah.
Now, say that's the fitness side. Everyone loves working out. Everybody loves telling other adults what to do. I believe it's a very unpopular opinion. I think the fitness industry is one of it's a career for me. I wish others would treat it as a career.
Yeah.
But it has the lowest barrier of entry to tell other adults what to do. And who doesn't love that? Because that's a horrible reason to be a coach, right? But people have to be upfront with that notion and acknowledge it first. And it's like, in 6 weeks, you can tell 20 other adults or 180 other adults what to do and how to eat. Like that, it's a little scary, right? A little scary.
Yeah.
It's been great for me, but a little scary.
Yep.
But it was understanding the formula, hospitality, how to treat people. That stuff has always kind of also come naturally. I mean, what's probably been the most challenging, and I've been obsessed with leadership, at least to some degree, in the last probably 6 to 8 years. And it's holding standards is the most, and saying no to people's money has been incredibly challenging. And it was, when you first start off, you have your grinding and your hustling phase where you'll do anything, you know what I mean? Like I lived below poverty. Like I made more money from 2006 to 2009 as a contracted engineer for the military than I made from 2012 to 2007. I made more in one of those years than I made in the 5 collected years from 2012 to 2016.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I'm living like way down here. And when people, you'll do anything to get cash or get somebody in your gym. This is before I opened my business, right? This is before we opened our business. But once the culture is yours and you're responsible for it, it's a different game to where everybody loves principles until it applies to them. So you would see the same culture that you develop relationships with people, and I'm also I'm a believer that the coach you have now might not be the coach you need for 5 years.
Yeah.
Right. You need to. Things have to change. It's like evolution, like dating or whatever the thing is.
I had that discussion with a client yesterday.
Yeah, but so sometimes those things fall apart, and it sucks and it's unfortunate. But managing the culture and trying, our coaching staff here, we've had a lot of people who were far more educated than me that couldn't last in this gym. They couldn't last coaching. It was all X's and O's. They knew the CSCS book inside and out. They had master's degrees, and they had the personality and soft skills of a chopping block, right? And again, coming back to you have to blend the science with the religion. You're still interacting with humans.
Yeah.
So, V23 is obviously, when it started, it's a manifestation of myself and Ruthie and even Keegan and our coaches, right? I think this is mostly of myself and Ruth, most likely.
Yeah.
But it's a manifestation of us. So it's like when you talk about the energy and the vibe, like when you walk into our gym, like people here work hard. I'm not saying a lot of people don't work, a lot of people work hard. But there's something about a group and a community of people we don't have the whiteboard. We're not in this pissing contest with one another. You look around the room and you're like, Andrew's over there doing his absolute best for what he needs to do.
Yeah.
Keegan's over there doing his absolute best for when you're surrounded by people like this all the time, don't ask me what's normal. Because I leave this gym and I'm like, well, hold on, I have to control, delete. This is the real world. Because what happens in here is totally different.
It's a different reality.
And if people aren't online with that, if they just want to come in and do the thing, and they're like, hey dude, I'm gonna pay you some money, and you're not gonna, we're gonna have this premeditated mediocrity is what I call it in a lot of places for coaches who have refused to accept responsibility for them being in a leadership position. It's like homeboy comes in, you're the coach, I need to lose 60 pounds. So I'm like, hey dude, like this is what we're gonna do. I'm gonna pay you, and you're not gonna give me flack or really push me, right? You're gonna train me, but not really train me.
Yep.
And then we're just gonna do this a whole bunch. And we're gonna do it for a long time. Because I haven't accepted responsibility for my own improvement.
Yeah.
I'm just like, no, it's his fault. Like, tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Because people expect to be taught, and they forgot how to learn.
Yep.
You on the other hand, you don't have to do your job. You just start the clock, sit around on your phone, like, woo, you clap a whole bunch. You're the best high five in the room. And it's like that, yet we're spending millions every year. We're spending an extra 10 to 15% in I can't remember how the fitness industry is now, but it's increasing every year with supplementation, coaching, with education. Go look around. I don't see the results in the general population. And V23 to me is the antithesis of that, to where it's like everybody here shows up, works hard, eyes on their own paper, and they support one another. That's why we can have athletes from a dozen different populations.
Yeah.
There's no hate here. You don't have the strongman people making fun of the CrossFitters and giving them shit for kipping, and the power lifter, we laugh about the Oli Bro chair for our Olympic lifters. It's like everybody has their eyes on their own paper. Yeah. And I do have to pat myself, Ruthie, and our coaching staff on the back for creating that environment to where it's not this toxic. And I've had, we run coaching seminars, and one of the questions I get asked a lot is like, have you kicked people out of your gym? And I'm like, have you not?
Yes. Yeah.
Have you not? Yeah. Absolutely. It's not something you feel good doing, and you don't have to be, you don't have to be a butthole about it.
Yeah.
But, I've had at least 10 athletes that I'm like, let me find a different gym for you.
Yeah.
Because it's not working. Because you don't talk back to my coaching staff, right? You don't just get to do whatever you want to do. No, you don't get to warm yourself up. If you can warm yourself, because all of we're coached start to finish.
Yeah, right.
If you think you can warm yourself up better than I can, then you train me. Because I want to get fit too. So if you can do this better than I can, let's send me your resume, dude.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Instead of just going in the corner doing God knows what. And that's the other thing is we've had to say no to a lot of money because every athlete under the V23 umbrella is trained by a V23 coach under a V23 program. And we program for athletes from tactical games to CrossFit to strongman to powerlifting to Highlands games, rugby, soccer, NFL, like the whole gamut, right? We don't have that one weirdo that comes in the corner doing God knows what, right? That's this program jumping every 6 weeks. First they're doing mayhem, then they're doing brute, then they're doing this. And we don't have that weirdo in the corner. Now we do have maybe one athlete in the whole gym that's a good friend of ours that has another coach that his brother's a phenomenal powerlifting coach. And I could not coach powerlifting better than he can.
Yeah.
And he's a great guy. And he stays out of the way, he does his thing, he's quiet, he's respectable, he's a phenomenal guy. A PhD in polymers, like super fascinating dude. Yeah, if he wants space in the gym, he gets it, but everybody else here is one unified team, one unified culture. Yeah. Right. So we had to say when people are, hey dude, like I just want to open gym, I want this. Like it's hard saying the first few years, it's very hard saying no to money. Yeah. But because we said no so often and stuck to our guns. Yep. And taught our athletes how to put the rowers away properly. And we've had athletes that we set boundaries and we set limitations. So we've had a number of athletes come over who were not well recommended because maybe they were toxic at another gym. But through what I learned through working with my father is that people respond to boundaries. And I think gym owners could learn something about setting more boundaries in their gym and not blaming stuff on the athlete. Because what happens when you blame it on the athlete? You are not accepting responsibility for that individual. And everybody underneath your roof, you need to accept responsibility for, which comes down to leadership. What is leadership? Accepting responsibility for the things that nobody else wants to. Right? That's what leadership is. So now we're at the point, we've been in this facility 3.5 years. V23 as it is now has been since 2017. Guess what? We don't have to worry about any toxic people. I mean, we have people that, going back to the boundaries thing, I'm sorry. We've had a couple of these, let's call them bad eggs, right? That they've come over and right off the bat, like you teach it or you tolerate it. Like those bad eggs, you probably taught them to tolerate it, right? Or that you tolerated it. They come over here, and as soon as you set up the boundaries, you're like, no, this is how we do it. Like, don't ask, tell. Yeah. No, barbell down, 3 lines. We're going to set this up, right, for a warm up or something. They respond to it. And what do you know? 5 months later, they're thriving. Yeah. They're making progress. They're happy. But also, I don't want you to come tell me about how bad it was at the, like, I don't want to hear it. Business is hard. I'm not saying like a year from now, I'm gonna be cringing at the things that I did this year in the business, right? So I understand it's hard, but we need, to me, there's not yet a framework in place to teach coaches this. And this is what I am going to begin accepting responsibility for as a leader, right? Or if I am a leader, if I'm who I say I am, then if this is a part of my best effort and my max expression, right, as a coach, then that's the next logical step.
Yeah.
So I want to be able to empower coaches and business owners to do that, build their own brand, right? And then set the boundaries for however they want to play the game.
Yeah.
These are the rules. And then once you have that, go on the field and play however you want to.
Yeah. Well, you just said the word brand, like building a brand is exactly what you said. You have to say no to things. Otherwise, there is no brand, right? If you're just like, oh, we do everything, that's not a brand. A brand is specific. And if you don't have those standards that you try to hold, then the brand gets diluted, right? And I'm a big believer in culture is not what you say, and culture is not what you do. Culture is what you allow to happen, right? If you're the leader of the space, if you say, oh, these are the rules, but then what you actually allow to happen, either by someone else or by yourself.
Yeah. And
right? That sets the precedence. That's what the culture is. That's what people see, and that's then what people assume is the way to do things.
I gave a speech and I nailed it, dude. I was so stoked. I was so stoked because I'd had a couple whiskeys. At our Christmas party, we have a huge Christmas party every year. It's like over the top, like everybody dresses up,
Yeah.
But you know, we call ourselves a tribe here, and I think tribes closely to, tribes are the disparity between tribes in their individual culture, right? You can have people that look the same, they dress the same, that live 50 miles apart, but their cultures are vastly different. So what do we talk about in the culture? We talk about the things they celebrate, what they have in common, their principles, their morals, their ethics, their how they operate.
Yeah.
So when you look at cultures, like I go into who's responsible for culture? The tribal elders. They're the ones who dictate what is acceptable and what's not. They don't just complain that everybody's running around town or around the tribe, like getting into trouble, getting their nose into shit, and just like, so it's like, what do we celebrate here as a culture? We celebrate hard work.
Yeah.
We celebrate humility. We celebrate learning. Though, and if these are the things we celebrate, that's what's going to be cultivated there.
Yeah.
If I just celebrate some dude going harder than someone else, and I celebrate the 5 games athletes or the 5 national champions, if I only celebrate them, then let's face it, none of those guys are paying a membership. Let's be honest. I'm not talking about here. I'm talking about gyms around the world.
Sure.
They're not paying a membership, and you're celebrating these people. Why? The chances are you didn't even get them to that point.
Right.
They're just using your gym, and you're taking advantage of that for social media. You're not even coaching them. They're just the weirdos in the corner doing their own workout. So what are you celebrating in your business? Is that what you're incentivizing? Because the new people who come in, they're looking at the person that looks like Reebok threw up all over them, that moves like shit, that has a bad attitude, that's super toxic, but wins all the workouts, and then makes excuses when they don't. Is that who you're celebrating? Because your new people see that. Yep. And if they see that, guess what you're grooming? You're grooming that toxic BS that is the reason that I had to open my own gym, is because I couldn't find any other place to work out.
Yeah.
Because I'd been to good gyms that had culture. Even if they didn't even if their practice didn't align with mine, right? I've been to movement gyms and gymnastics gyms and, classic strength and conditioning gyms. And I'm like, you walk in, you're like, whoa, something's different. Like something is different.
Yep.
And it's not by what they're doing. It's the energy, it's the vibe, it's only the new people stand out, right? Because like everybody's moving well, like everybody's flowing together. And a lot of gyms, it's just a cluster.
Yeah.
And it's like everybody, you have a bunch of me's running around. So when we talk about culture, is like, you need guidelines and you need to set boundaries on what your culture represents and what that means to people, because people this is business 101. People care more about why they're doing something and the belief behind it than they are about what the product necessarily is. I'm gonna give you an example. I'm not throwing anybody under the bus. Big companies. Rogue Fitness. What does Rogue show? Rogue shows an American blue-collared welder welding up equipment. Yep. Right? Emotional drive. Guys, I don't know who these know this. Rogue's not made in America. But I didn't say that. You have another company that was local here. All they did was show videos of equipment and like emotionless equipment. Like there's a kettlebell, there's a rack. There's no story behind it. There's no culture behind it. It doesn't stand for anything. It's just workout equipment. Why is one far more successful than the other? It's because it's something people believe in. Yeah. Right? It's creating emotional attachment. So when it comes to culture and things like that, you celebrate humility, hard work, camaraderie, like supporting one another, learning. Like people get into that. Maybe that's not why they came here. Maybe they came here because we have a dude who deadlifts 700 pounds. I don't care why they came here. Yep. But once they're under our umbrella, this is how we operate. Yeah. And I'm going to give you plenty of time to get a running start into it. I'm going to be right there beside you to guide you because there's nothing scary about what we do here. There's this, if you go on our social media, and remember, I'll never know what it's like to walk into V23 for the first time, right? I will never know. People look at our social media, they look at my Instagram page and they're like, I am scared to death to walk into this place. A majority of what we do is support one another, work hard, and compliment each other on our glutes. That's like 90% of what we do here. Yep. And say thank you and tell each other how much we appreciate one another. The working out and the training is automatic. That's just what we do, right? But it's what makes this place special is the support and the leadership, in my opinion, behind it, and what being a V23 athlete stands for, which is more than just being in shape. It's like if you want to lose 60 pounds or you want to bench 500, we know that we're still playing by the same set of rules, whether we want to do either of those, and we'll get you there. So if you come to us with a goal or not, like even if you just come and you're like, hey, I just want to explore, even better, even better, right? But we have the culture that it becomes autonomous. It becomes, I don't have to tell athletes how to put the rower away properly, right? We have a very specific way to go for rowers. I know I use that as a very poor example, but it's all those small things that add up. Our athletes know class doesn't start at 9:02. Right. Class starts at 9, right? And whether you're on that ship or not, like it's sailing. Yeah. Mind you, if you're late, that's fine. But people that show up late, they get right in line. Right. And why? Because we have a process, right? We have, when we go through our warm-up, every warm-up is individually specific to that workout, but at the same time, there's a process. So when new people come in and they look around, if you were a new individual in the gym, if I were a betting man, you would walk in, you would look around, and you would start doing what everybody else was doing, right? Because you want to fit in. You don't want to sit there with your thumb in your butt like the new guys. So you look around, oh, everybody's moving towards the whiteboard. Okay, I'm gonna move towards the whiteboard. Okay, everybody's getting, like you're setting up 3 lines. Okay, I'm gonna get more of these lines. I'm not trying to stand here by myself. So it becomes self-policing. And that is the beautiful thing about a culture, right? When you have, I hate to even call it operation because it's just subconscious for a majority of our population. Yeah. And when new people come in, I don't have to say anything to them because our athletes self-police. Right. And I've seen like, no, that's not how we do this here. And I just get to sit back and close my eyes. And my athletes become the thing, the community, it becomes a self-policing mechanism to where we just continue to improve. And but what does that say for our coaching staff? Our classes run so much more efficiently. Yep. It's not this, but a box of kittens running around everywhere. Like, so what does that mean? It means we get more done. It means we move through movements more quickly. It's like everything becomes light years smoother if everybody knows their place and what they're doing.
It's like any team, any organization, any whatever, right? The ones that have the cultures and standards that are set and maintained tend to run more efficiently. It's a well-oiled machine. And then when you do have, right, if the culture and the environment is self-policing by the other people that are on board with that, when you do have a quote unquote bad egg come in, either one of two things are gonna happen. Like you said, they're either gonna fall in line and they're not a bad egg anymore, or they're gonna self-select out, right?
You nailed it with the self-select.
You don't have to send them out. They will decide for themselves, I'm not on board with this culture, I'm gonna go somewhere else. And that's great. And that's great for them and that's great for you, right? Like, that's good for everybody. If this is not where you wanna be, then don't be here. And then, yeah, I think you nailed it with the self-policing, by having a culture of people that like everybody's on board. And that's one thing that I definitely feel here, coming in as someone who, regularly speaking, doesn't train here. When you do a training session here, that's what it is. It's a bunch of fist bumps. It's not a bunch of like, oh, I'm competing to beat you. It's, I'm competing with myself. You're competing with yourself. I expect you to push yourself to whatever your limits are safely. And I'm gonna celebrate you for that, whether you have 1 plate on the bar or you have 10 plates on the bar, right? Like, great job. Give me a fist bump. Let's go do this next step of the training.
Yeah, but also it's not just, it's the one of the running jokes, especially with some of my more advanced athletes, you get like your one good job a year. It's like your gold star, you know what I mean? Especially we do so much speed work, and I'm never impressed with speed. Because it can always be faster, right? It's this obsession over certain things when it comes to certain types of strength training. But it's like when you sandbag a workout, you give when I say sandbag, I'm not meaning scale or slow down. That's not what I'm saying, because if I have 13 athletes in the class, chances are that workout's being chopped up in 9 different ways. And I have some people doing it a longer aerobic version, right? I have some people, and then some people, I'm gonna say, if Rich Froning came in here right now, I would take our same workout, scale it up, and he would get the same relative intensity that everybody else would, right? Sure. Keep using CrossFit references. Where's it going with that?
You said if you sandbag a workout.
Yes, you give other people permission to do the same. And when you work hard and aren't scared of failing in front of other people, it also gives others permission to do the same. When you say, guess what, like I just got back from, not me, athlete comes in and says, hey, I've been gone for a month on travel. If he has permission, like, dude, you're not doing interval weight training. You're not doing IWTs if you've been on the road for 4 months, right? Working out business travel. Like, you're gonna come in, I'm gonna have you do a 40-minute workout, you're gonna do some carries and like light aerobic work. I don't want your heart rate getting above like 135. I want you to move and sweat. It gives other people permission to do the same, where they're like, now we're opening conversation to where it's like, hey, like, last time we did XYZ, like this happened, is there something else I could do differently? So we've created, it's not a problem, but we have the opposite of, not approach, and I don't want to use the word problem, what's the term I'm looking for? We have an opposite scenario here, where in a lot of box gyms that I've been in, everyone's like, no, I have to do this like prescribed, I have to do this. It's like, dude, bro, when you're about to do 35 reps, like 90% of your max, like knock it off, dude, right? To where everybody's vying to try to, pardon my language, kind of big dick one another by showing off, by validating how good they are at something. I don't care how good you are, I care about how good you want to be, right? I'm more concerned with your ceiling than where you're at, right? Trajectory. So our athletes have gotten to the point where they are not only just comfortable modifying movements, but they're actually requesting. Right? I have a tactical community here that outside of some primary barbell movements, they don't need to do barbell cycling. They need to do sandbag work and rope pulls and sled work and front work and step ups. They don't need, I'm sorry, dude, they don't need to do kicking pull-ups. They don't need to. If they get to the very top of the pyramid and that's what's holding them back, chances are, if they're at that point, I can teach them a butterfly pull-up or something in 20 seconds because they already have the requisite strength, stability, speed, body awareness, yada, yada, right? To get that. But that's not what's lacking in their life, right? That's not what's lacking in their physical capability for the job. So our athletes will come in and actually like, hey, like, this is my train of thought for how I'm feeling today. So this is how, like, what do you think? And now we have a conversation. Okay, well, no, I think that's a great idea. Why don't you, instead of using the barbell, why don't you get an axle? Instead of why don't you get a sandbag? Instead of pull-ups, oh, you just had a kid 12 weeks ago? Maybe you shouldn't even be doing strict pull-ups yet because you got DR?
Yeah.
Is it DR?
Yes, that's right.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I was about to say Rectus, glad you said that. So maybe you shouldn't even do strict pull-ups. Maybe I have you doing like some bird dog rows or something like that for your back, mixed with your dead bugs or whatever else your professional has you doing.
Yeah,
So
sure.
I'm not gonna be like, oh no, like, no, you're doing strict pull-ups. No, 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 no. When you get cleared and when I feel comfortable with you doing this, then you'll do it. Even if you want to do strict pull-ups, I'm not gonna let you do it yet until you can prove to me that you know, understand your abdominal pressure, pulling in, transverse, up and in, pelvic floor. So again, we've created an opposite scenario where people are more willing and more open to change movements than they are about obsessing over 135.95, dude. Like that's gonna get me where I want to go. And it's like, chances are it's not, dude. People made those numbers up.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a representation of what should be 60% of your max of that movement. That really is. And somebody made that up, and now you live and die by it.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with that.
Yeah, for sure. I think that kind of is like, you know, the answer or the way to do things needs to be adaptable to the scenario that presents itself, right? And I love the example that you gave of someone, you know, who was traveling or whatever. Like the same thing happens in my training. Maybe I have planned to do heavy deadlifts on this particular day, but maybe the last 4 nights of sleep that I had were absolute shit, right? It would maybe be appropriate to modify what I had planned, right? Like, and you know, maybe one day you do, maybe one day you don't, maybe one day you decide, no, I'm gonna do it anyways, and that's okay for a time and a place to do that. But is that always the way to handle things? No, there's never an always, right? And I think that's one of the cool things about when you have people, whether it's your profession, my profession, that are willing to have that conversation. We can then have it to whatever depth we want to, right? And we can mold things and tailor things based on the scenario and based on how curious we want to be about situations. But I think it's, go ahead.
Oh, I want to unpack something where you just spoke about like modification. And this is where with programming, so to get tech, even though to me programming is the least interesting thing about my job, right? That's one of the easiest, it comes most natural to me. It's the least interesting thing. It's the thing everyone else is obsessed with. I'm not that in. Like if all you want to talk about is programming, like I'm not that interested. Like I'm not a YouTube video, I'm not a book, right? I'm a human being. That we tell our coaches when it comes to modifying, the only way you can correctly modify a movement, in my eyes, is if there's an intended stimulus or an intended intention behind the program the athlete's on. It has to be tethered to purpose. And the way I'm training now, I wish I would have started my entire fitness journey on. I'm doing a lot of endurance aerobic work and a lot of maximal strength work, right? That's what I'm doing right now. So I'm essentially recreating my base that I lost by specializing in CrossFit, by specializing in powerlifting, by specializing in strongman. So it's all, even though I learned through all of those things, right? And I'm probably a more robust individual than most, but I always come back to the basics where I'm doing running, long endurance work, and maximal strength barbell work, some gymnastics peppered in there, some body work stuff. But if there's not intention behind the program, then how do you know what you should be doing that? Because I know right now I'm on kind of an off-season power building program. So I know that I'm doing XYZ on Monday, Wednesday, Friday I do the thing, and then I have running intervals on this day, and I'm doing ski intervals. So I have this paddle thing coming up, and I'm cycling a lot more because I'm getting back into that. But there's an approach over 10 to 12 weeks at a time, right? So if I flew back from Hawaii Sunday night, got like 4 hours sleep. On Monday, I can modify my movements when I'm fatigued and my CNS is in the trash and just go like, I know how to go light, but still understand how that's going to affect next week or my next pressing day on Thursday. But if we just throw this unknown and unknowable random stuff at the board, then we can't properly, I want to say the term negotiate, but we can't properly apply something other than just something totally random. Like maybe you just need to go like get on a bike for 40 minutes, which is totally cool. But we can't properly, optimal doesn't exist, it's on a gradient. But if there's not intention, if the program isn't tethered to some form of purpose or intention, then we can't make the necessary adjustment to what the athlete needs to be doing that day.
Yeah.
Right? If it's, and sometimes it looks like what we talk about with our athletes, with our newer athletes, like, look, the whiteboard, what's on the whiteboard, that's the soup du jour, but the full kitchen's always open. A full kitchen, we will do whatever's necessary to move the needle. Chances are it has nothing to do with on that whiteboard that day.
Yeah.
But if somebody who's in the program and they're relatively fit and they're like, hey, you know, I have this shoulder thing. Well, if our program is tethered to purpose and I know what they're doing, not only over the next 4 to 5 days on the micro level, but on the macro level, like what the goal is for 12 weeks,
yeah,
I can better curtail a movement selection and relative intensity for what they need to do that day. That'll move the needle for them without exacerbating the injury or the tweak or with their nervous system in the trash because they didn't sleep. Like I still know I can set them up for success tomorrow. And maybe that's going to be, I want you doing, you know, 20 minutes of nasal breathing on the bike and then some core work, something simple. Maybe I just tell them like, dude, like go home, hydrate, caught up on sleep.
go for a walk.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Because I don't want to trash you today because tomorrow's a super intense workout, right?
Yeah.
So that it all has to be tethered to purpose. So that's one thing we tell coaches where it's like, instead of just like deck of cards can be fun, like the deck of cards workout. I've never done that because I coach adults and those adults pay for my services and my services are not random workouts. If you want random workouts, that's fine. I can tell you 10 other gyms you can get a golf ball from here. It'll take your money. I won't. In that approach, like where was I going with that? Sometimes I'll lose track.
Well, you were basically talking about, you know, the intention behind when you decide to modify something. Maybe on this day, you send someone home, go get some sleep, do your walk.
Right.
Tomorrow you're coming in. It's an intense day. Because there's always a purpose behind what's happening and when it's happening.
Yeah, and it does how like the variation of high intensity days to low intensity days, like there's a Olympic level, I think it's Olympic level endurance athletes. I think like the Kenyans, there are some days where they just walk.
Yeah,
that's all they do. Like the best runners in the world, they're just walking. That's the other thing. Let's talk about bring it back around to how I'm training now, where it's like, and what you've been hearing for years that nobody does is just that long steady state like aerobic work, like what that does for your general health. And I'm not sure if you listen to the a Tia podcast. You listen to the one with Ian Huberman?
I did.
It was so good. It was so good. It's talking about a healthy person is going to be able to get fitter than a non-healthy person, right? So it's like, how can we get your natural biomarker? How can we get your biomarkers in a good place? Your body, like, don't come at me with carnivore and vegan and biohacking if your capacity is in the trash, right? If you look like I made it sound shallow. If you look like, I'm not going to take financial advice from broke people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, you need to have some skin in the game, some capacity. I think some references you mentioned were like maybe your VO2 in the 70th percentile. Maybe your body fat's not the best indicator of health, but it's not relevant, right? Based on how the individual is. So it's, Yep.
No, this has been fun. And I think, hopefully some of this stuff in this episode makes you curious, right? The things that you've heard us sort of talk about and go back and forth about, go off on tangents. What you can see is we don't know all the answers. We're never going to know all the answers, but we're curious to learn more and to find out more and figure out how can we refine and learn and then apply what we've learned and then do it all over again, right? Do it all over again. And then 2 years down the line, we're going to learn something else and we're going to change everything that we've been doing because we're learning new information every day, every week, and that's kind of the philosophy that, you guys have here, I have. And, I think it's clear you and I can sit here and talk all day, right? About this stuff. But, what I want to make sure we do is, if someone was listening to this episode and they became more curious by us having this conversation, now they have more questions. How does someone get in touch with you in order to continue that conversation?
Easiest way, Instagram, obviously social media is super easy. It's @_Beau Ryan, BeaurYan. Feel free to shoot me an email directly. It's beau@v23 as in Victor23.fit, FIT, or shoot a general email to info@v23.fit. I enjoy getting questions from people, and if there's anything you heard me say that needs clarity or that you don't agree with, I would absolutely love to hear your, if there's a comment section, sure, but again, it's like looking at the thinking behind the idea is more important than the idea itself. So yeah, no, this was super fun, and yeah, that was great. Thanks for having me on.
Dude, thanks for having me over here. Thanks for carving out some time to do this. For all of you guys that listened to this episode on the code, thank you for being here. And what Beau just mentioned, if there's a comment section, anything like that, if you liked this episode, please go ahead, leave us a review. We really appreciate your guys' feedback. Ask us questions, send me things. We want to make sure these episodes are relevant and valuable for you guys, and we want to tailor them and be curious about what you want to know, tailor those things to you so that every time you tune in to listen to us, you get something out of it. So again, my name is Dr. Andrew Fix from Physio Room. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Code, and we'll catch you guys next time. Thanks, Beau.
Thank you.